I'm Clay Lane, Caterpillar's Waste Application Specialist, and today we're going to do a pre-shift inspection on this MH3024. Before we get started on our pre-shift inspection, there's a couple things I'd like to address about the process of the walk-around inspection. So the biggest question we always get is, where is the proper place to start your pre-shift inspection? Well, that's really up to the operator. It doesn't matter where you start your inspection, but the one thing that we recommend at Caterpillar is to start in the same place every time. Whether you like starting in the rear of the machine or the front of the machine, but always start in that same place every time, make it a routine. Some of the other things you're gonna do, you wanna look up, down, under, and all around, and you wanna be able to physically touch and visibly see everything as well, using your senses to conduct that pre-shift walk around. The first thing I do before I start my pre-shift inspection is I go to the back of the machine where the disconnect switch is, and I wanna remove that disconnect key. So as I remove that, this is a safety feature because this is going to ensure that if I'm on the other side of this machine conducting my walk-around inspection, nobody else can jump in that machine, start it up, and do anything if they don't see me up there. So now that I pulled the key, now when we talk about starting in the same place every day, I'm left-handed. So I always like the left front of the machine. So we're going to go back up to the front of the machine on the left side and start our pre-shift inspection. Now, up here at the front of the machine to start our pre-shift, a few things that I want to look at. I obviously want to check out my grapple, and things I'm going to look for on the grapple is any type of structural damage. I want to look down at the cutting edge and the bolts inside on the cutting edge to make sure all the bolts are tight. I want to look at my hydraulic lines. I want to make sure I don't have any leaks on my hydraulic lines. I want to make sure I don't have any damage to those lines as well, because I want to catch that if it's a small leak. I want to catch that before I'm out there working this machine in the harsh environment of the transfer station, and then that hydraulic line blows while I've got to load inside that grapple or anything. So I always start looking at the stick, and then I'll kind of glance down and look at the boom. And some of the things that I'm looking for on that stick is anytime I see any kind of cracked paint, that's usually a good indication I've got some type of structural damage that's happened. So I want to look for cracked paint. I want to look at all my pins and make sure all my keepers are in place. I want to look at the hydraulic cylinders and the chrome on the cylinders, make sure there's no leaks around that seal on the end, as well as there's no damage to that chrome or that cylinder. Also, it's a good practice to get into of keeping a rag with you. So if I can reach some of those hydraulic cylinders, I can wipe off that dust around that dust seal. Because as that dirt and debris builds up, every time that cylinder goes in, it takes a little bit of that dust with it, and eventually we'll end up with a leak around that seal. Next, we want to look at the blade up front on this machine. And what I'm looking for here is, once again, any type of structural damage, anything out of the ordinary. I also want to look at my lift cylinder on here, and I got a good area where I can see the chrome. I can get close to it. I can wipe off any of that dust or debris that's built up around it. And I also want to look at those hydraulic lines that are going to that cylinder, make sure I don't have any leaks. As I check that out, now what I'm looking for is on my outriggers. Want to also look for any damage on the cylinder. But I also want to look inside here and make sure there's no garbage or debris built up inside there. As we all know, being in a transfer station or in a landfill, trash is going to end up everywhere that it can. And even in places we think that it's not going to get into, it ends up there. So we always want to look inside here, make sure I don't have any debris built up inside that compartment there by the cylinder. I'm also looking at my pins, make sure those keepers are in place and that they're tight. As I come around, I want to check out my tires. I want to make sure these are solid, but I want to make sure I don't have any pieces ripped off of it. I also want to look down, make sure my lug nuts are tight. You know, we can always look for, if I see anything shiny behind that lug nut or that washer, you know, and it's real bright and shiny, good indication maybe it's loose and it's rolling around. Or if I see any rust streaks coming down behind that lug nut, it's a good indication that maybe it's loose because I'm getting some moisture built up behind there. So I definitely want to check out the tires, and I always just want to check out my steps and any of my handhelds. So this allows me to have my 3 points of contact and be safe as I enter that machine or as I depart the machine. Continuing on, inspecting our steps as we step back, this allows me a good line of sight to look at my bolts on my bottom step, make sure those are all in place and tight. Now as I turn around and look up, I'm going to look at my ladder to climb up, make sure it's good and secure. I've got my washer fluid fill. I've got my auto lube case right here. Now, good practice to get into with our auto lube, just to ensure that it's working through the day. You can take a piece of masking tape or a wax pencil or something that's going to mark it and not leave a permanent mark of where that grease level is. And then you'll be able to note throughout the day if it's going down at all, and that's going to give you a good indication that that system's working. Okay, so just a little trick there. But I got my lift cylinder here for my cab that's going to raise. I'm just looking at anything inside here that's out of the ordinary, you know, that might get damaged, because once again, we're in that harsh environment of the transfer station. So, you know, it's going to be very easy for stuff to get caught up inside there and cause any problems. So I want to catch it while it's a small problem. I'm going to open up inside here, battery compartment. Once again, here's my master disconnect switch. Here's my emergency fuel shut off. So if I got to kill the engine from the outside, I've also got my hydraulic sight gauge. And you'll notice on our hydraulic sight gauge, we got a little triangle in there. When you look at that, it looks like an upside down golf flag. That's telling me level. And then I've also got my lines in there that tells me where my safe zones are and where I need to be on that hydraulic level. We also have our DEF tank. This is where I'm going to put my DEF in. I've got a sight gauge on the other side of that now on that DEF tank. So I'll be able to see how much I've got in there. Also just looking at any of the wires, any of the clips, anything that might be out of the ordinary that I want to catch while it's a small problem. Another thing right up here too, right above our disconnect, is our wait to disconnect light. So what that's going to do is when that light's illuminated, I can't shut this machine off, because that's allowing my DEF to purge out of the lines and go back into the tank. Okay, as we come around to the back part of the machine, I was going to do another inspection on my tires, just like I did in the front, and the same with this outrigger, just like we did in the front. Same thing, looking for any trash buildup inside, looking for any damage to the tires. Now, as I walk to the back of the machine, I want to look for any damage on the lights. I also want to make sure my backup camera is clean, as well there's no damage to it. I'm going to look at my steps, make sure I've got good access to where there's no damage and I can have my 3 points of contact to step up. And then also, this is a good time for me to be able to look underneath the material handler itself, look at my swing bearing over there underneath, make sure there's no debris built up, make sure nothing's wearing, look at my bolts that are over there, make sure nothing's starting to back out or anything's out of the ordinary. And I'm going to check that out the whole way around that machine as well. And then this is another good spot where I can look for any leaks that are coming down from underneath the belly of the machine, whether it's oil or hydraulic. So it gives me a good line of sight to look for any leaks. Now let's come around to the other side of the machine and let's look inside the engine compartment over here. A few things that we want to look for over here. Number one, here's my oil dipstick. We always want to check our oil. Stepping back, looking straight up through there is a sight glass for my coolant level. So I should be able to see it in the sight glass. That's up there. But just inside the engine compartment, we just want to look at, once again, make sure nothing out of the ordinary. I don't have any leaks. This is my fuel water separator. Here is my fuel filter element. And one thing I will point out on any of these things where we have filters is this says it's got a fuel pump, it's got a dash line, and it says H2O. Anytime I see that dash line under our ISO symbols, that always represents filter. So that's what's telling me that I've got filters here as well, okay? Here's gonna be my oil fill. And then once again, we're just gonna look for any debris or anything that might be built up around my alternator, around the turbo, around any component inside that machine. Right up top here is our clean emissions module for our tier 4. So we just want to look at it, make sure nothing's out of the ordinary and nothing's broke there. Everything looks good, so we'll shut this and we'll move on. Now, as I move on, I'm once again going to look at my steps and any handhelds, make sure the bolts are in place. I've got a toolbox here. I want to make sure that it's latched and it's shut well. Now, let's go over here to the radiator and the package and let's open up and take a look inside. We got our air filter. Once again, I've got an ISO symbol there that tells me this is the air filter. We've got our cooling package. I can pull this open, look inside, make sure there's nothing built up. Get any of that debris that's out of there. We made it very easily accessible for an operator to open up in our pre-shift and keep that area cleaned out. Okay, so we got inside there, we close that. I've got another camera here on the side, so we want to make sure that that's clean and free of any debris up top. And then also we always want to keep an eye right here. Okay, this is the motor for the vibratory screen to shake any of the dust off. So we just want to take a quick look, make sure that the wire's in place and there's no damage to that motor. We're now finished up with all our ground level surface area checks. I'm going to check out my tires over here again, just like I did with the other 3. Same with my outrigger, doing the same check there. This gives me another opportunity here too to stop, look inside at those lift cylinders, look at anything up top, and then also I'm going to check that boom out as I'm walking back up here to the front on this side of the grapple. So I look at my boom, I look at my stick, making sure my lines are good, I don't have any leaks, all my pins are in place, I don't have any structural damage to my grapples or anything on my stick as well, okay? That brings me right back to the place that I started. So I would now conclude my pre-shift, go around, put my disconnect key in, and I'm ready to go to work. But once again, you know, we just recommend starting in the same place every time for your pre-shift. Look for anything that's out of the ordinary and use your 4 senses, you know, looking up, down, under, and all around, and utilizing those 4 senses to give you a good pre-shift inspection.